on the front line of this tragedy. Back to you, Jim and Colleen.
All right, Gary Cutley, thank you for that. Well, we want to show you once again some of the video in case you've just tuned in, video that is coming to light as the day wears on. That an angle of the second plane as it plowed into the World Trade Center. That videotape, perhaps because the cameraman was trapped down there in lower Manhattan and couldn't make his way out, just coming to us now. Terrifying, awesome, so much pain in a picture of what happened this day in New York City, and indeed the pictures have been nonstop.
Yeah, and that being United Airlines Flight 175, 65 people on board that plane. Jean Meserve is watching things in Washington for us tonight. Let's go to her for the very latest. Jean?
Colleen, President Bush started his day in Florida, but returned to the White House just as the sun was setting. The arrival designed to show that the United States leadership will not be cowed. A short while later, Mr. Bush addressed the American people and the world from the Oval Office. Let's listen to his full address.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve. for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
Following his address, Mr. Bush attended a national security meeting. CNN senior White House correspondent John King is perched on a building near the White House this evening. John, what happened at that meeting and what's happened since?
Quite an extraordinary meeting, Gene. The president not only meeting with his national security, military, and defense team, but also bringing into that meeting the transportation secretary, the secretary of health and human services, the federal emergency management director. All that because so much of this now proceeding on parallel tracks. On the one hand, the federal government taking extraordinary steps to make medical personnel, portable morgues, and others available both in New York and at that scene over at the Pentagon. The investigation is also underway. We are told at that meeting by senior sources that it was discussed that the administration is building evidence that it believes points to people and groups associated with Osama bin Laden. The administration declining to say so publicly, but we are told by sources that was discussed at that meeting with the president and also has been discussed in private briefings senior administration officials have given members of Congress. Now, priority one for the president is to send reassuring signals to the American people that their government is at work during this investigation and during the recovery operations underway in New York and at the Pentagon. And to that end, we are told the president will bring the bipartisan leadership of Congress to the White House tomorrow for a public event. The rest of the president's scheduled tomorrow and for the rest of the week on hold, as the president obviously will be on hand at the White House to meet again with his national security team and assess anything he needs to do, both to respond to what has happened here in the United States, and we know there are troop deployments and other security precautions being taken overseas as well. Gene?
John, any word about the prospect of retaliatory strikes?
You obviously heard the president in his remarks saying if and when there are retaliatory strikes, they would not just be limited to the suspected terrorists, but also to anyone who harbors them. That taken, of course, as a signal to some that even the president was leaning a bit forward with the bin Laden connection. But I spoke to a senior official immediately after that session tonight who said, don't expect anything on an imminent basis. This official said, we're going to get this right. We're going to take a little time, he said, to sort this out. Gene?
John, will life be different tomorrow for the president and also for average Americans in terms of security precautions?
Life will be different for the president and the entire country. We have seen around the grounds of the White House behind me, it is dark in the complex now, but extraordinary security circumstances throughout the day. Indeed, as the president flew back to Washington today, if you looked out the window of Air Force One, you could see military fighter jets in very close proximity to Air Force One, and the president was brought back hours later than they had hoped. At one point, they wanted to bring the president directly back from Florida. Then he made a stop in Louisiana for a military base. They decided not to bring him back immediately because at that time, we are told, not all of the aircraft in the skies over the United States had been accounted for. The White House was not willing to bring the president back into Washington until all those aircraft had been accounted for and until other security steps were taken. Now, as for average Americans, we are told the plan is to reopen the nation's air traffic control system and therefore the nation's domestic air travel at noon tomorrow, barring any new troubling information overnight. Any American, though, going to an airport or a major train station in the days ahead, we are told, will see extraordinarily new, stringent security measures. Gene?
Senior White House correspondent John King, thank you. And now back to Jim Clancy in Atlanta.
All right, Gene, thank you for that. Well, earlier we heard what it was like for a professional cameraman on the scene at the World Trade Center this day, but what was it like to really witness the attack as an amateur, as someone who was there for another reason entirely? That's what happened with Dr. Mark Heath this day. He went to the scene to see if he could help the victims of the first attack, and he wound up being caught in the second.
I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind the car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just need a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you? Oxygen.
Don't have oxygen.
Hey!
Hello, Doc. Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks. Told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area. See if I can help, so that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on. So far, I've just seen some people who needed oxygen from the dust. That was one trauma. Gonna go wash my eyes out. Yeah, that almost made it worse. Looking north on the West Side Highway. You guys going in?
Yeah.
Come with you. You know, you might not want to get too much closer, because the more buildings could come down, then we're not going to help anybody.
All right.
I think we should. Yeah.
Where's the incident come out?
Let's just.
Oxygen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait right here. Let's just station up right here, okay?
All right, Doc.
Why don't we set up? Can you hang IVs from this pole here?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. We just heard another explosion. They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there. Just gonna wait here until they bring some people out. I was hooked up with some firemen with some first aid stuff.
What are we doing?
You know what?
Anything?
Why don't we just set this up as a little mobile hospital unit right here, okay?
Hold on to tie against all units that are available. We're going to have a new command post on Murray Street and West Street. Any units
Suggestion, should we set up here for medical work? Think this is safe enough?
And there we have it. One man's journey, an incredible journey through a day of disaster. That was amateur video from Dr. Mark Heath. Colleen.
All right, Jim. Well, disaster relief agencies say they're rushing blood supplies to New York City and to Washington as well. People have been jamming donation centers to help the untold number of victims of these attacks. The American Red Cross says it has 60,000 units of blood in several East Coast cities that it can ship to hospitals in New York City and Washington. Even people on the other side of the country in Los Angeles have been lining up at blood donation centers. Authorities say they will continue to need donations, though, over the next 2 weeks, even longer, we're hearing now, perhaps even a couple of months to replenish their supplies. Officials say the most needed blood types: O positive, O negative. They are the universal blood types that can be transfused into anyone in an emergency. Now, at hospitals throughout the New York area, medical heroics are going on. Michael Oku is standing by at St. Vincent's Hospital and Medical Center, which is one of the trauma centers closest to the World Trade Center. Michael, go ahead.
Colleen, they call this a city that never sleeps, and I'm sure that tonight in New York, no one is doing that. And yet, despite that, there's a very eerie silence that's broken across the city tonight, as you can well imagine, only occasionally broken by the sound of emergency medical vehicles. I'm standing in Lower Manhattan, just south of 14th Street, and if you can look just north of me, you can see that police have set up barricades so that no one can come below this part of New York City, and it limits traffic to this part of New York City to just the occasional emergency medical vehicle and to police vehicles. I'm standing just about 2 blocks west of St. Vincent's Hospital, which has been set up as the main trauma and triage center here in New York. As of 10:30 last night, which was the time of the last hospital press conference, officials at St. Vincent's Hospital said that there were 327 patients who had been admitted. 50 to 55 of them were in critical condition, and they also reported, of course, that there were 3 deaths. Most of the victims, they say, had suffered from severe burns. Most of those burns had been burns that were sustained in the face, and there were occasional cases in which patients suffered from cardiac arrest, some from existing conditions which were, of course, triggered by this trauma. Now, Governor Pataki was here earlier at St. Vincent's, and he reported that he met with victims as well as some of the doctors who worked on some of the patients here. He said that every story seemed to be an unusual one, and you can imagine there are no usual stories tonight. For the most part, the scene outside the hospital looks like this. Dozens of men and women in scrubs, under portable lights, waiting. Basically gurneys that have been set up, wheelchairs, office furniture covered in sheets as they await more victims, more people whose lives they are hoping to save. That's what the scene looks like outside St. Vincent's Hospital tonight, and what I have to report is probably one of the most eerie nights that I've spent in the city. The hospital says that they will have another briefing later this morning at 6:30. Back to you.
All right, Michael Oku, thanks very much. Jim?
As America came under attack, so too did its financial sector. Wall Street virtually shut down this day because of the attacks in New York City, as well as across the country when all airlines were shut down. President Bush going on television to reassure not only Americans, but others who have an interest, who share in the globalization that has taken place within the financial world. And markets are reacting to the events in the United States yesterday. Let's go to Richard Quest. He joins us from London. Richard.
Many thanks, Jim. Of course, there was no trading in the United States, so the initial financial reaction has had to come from overseas. Europe saw very sharp falls as the news came in from New York and Washington. That's been followed up overnight in the Far East. Asian markets are down between around 6 to 10%, 10% in the Hong Kong market. The worry, of course, is clearly what this will mean for the wider issue of the economy. Clearly, business will be seriously affected as Wall Street is paralyzed. Simply those who can't even get to their offices to do business, let alone those who have actually been affected by the crashes. Overall, nobody can really say at this point the extent to the economic effect. We do know that the Fed is planning to pump money into the economy. That's designed not only to prevent a cash shortage, ordinary consumers who may just be taking larger sums out of the bank, but also to prevent any form of credit crunch, Jim.
All right, when you look at the markets, is there any way of telling how long-lived this might be, this steep drop that you see in Asia right now?
I think that one has to put this into two different categories. On the one hand, there is the market reaction. That can unwind itself in a matter of days. That is simple panic. We've seen markets react before. 2 weeks later, you wonder what had happened. Much more serious is the effect to business confidence. Bearing in mind, the World Trade Center had over 435 tenants in those two buildings alone. They come from more than 26 countries around the globe. There were major financial institutions, Morgan Stanley, Keefe, Bruyette & Woods, Credit Suisse First Boston, just some of those who are actually in the buildings. Now, taking away from that and moving slightly further afield, you've got, of course, the collapse of number 7 World Trade Center. You've then got all the other buildings nearby where people simply won't be able to get to work. The ripple effects will start to be felt. And that's why it's vital that people like Paul O'Neill, the US Treasury Secretary, who's now leaving Japan and heading back to the United States, Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Fed, who's at a bankers meeting in Basel in Switzerland, and the SEC, are all coordinating at the moment, not only to send a message that they will provide the money necessary for corporate America to continue, but also to restore confidence in the market system.
All right, Richard Quest reporting to us there from London. Colleen.
All right, and of course, as we've been telling you all along, some of the rescue efforts still going on tonight, especially in New York City, and we've actually got some tape in just now that we want to show you of those night rescue operations in and around the area of the World Trade Center. Just backing it up there a little bit. Let's see if we can get it rolling again. You can see some of the areas that have been lit. We heard earlier from a report from CNN's Deborah Farrick, who was down in that area, that they do have dogs there. They've got cadaver dogs searching. Even that is being made difficult because there's so much dust on the ground. She was saying that even the dogs can't really do their work. So still a lot to sift through. There have been reports this evening of telephone calls, cell phone calls being made, possibly from the basement area of that complex. None of that's been confirmed, but of course rescue officials hoping and trying to see if there are people still alive. They want to be able to get them out. We heard earlier from the New York mayor that more than 300 firefighters they believe are missing and presumed dead, and dozens of police officers as well who were surrounding that building when the two towers essentially just crumbled into dust. So you're looking at some pictures there in and around the World Trade Center of the night rescue operation still underway at this time.
And incredible pictures, because really that's our best look really at the destruction that we've seen thus far, because it was enveloped in clouds of dust for so long during the daylight hours. Very inaccessible, but you can see the way that the buildings are simply gone. All you see are the shell.
Yeah, you see a few floors there, Jim, just a few, obviously badly burnt out.
But having worked there, and you know, CNN had its New York bureau in the World Trade Center when the network first started on the air 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And when I look at those pictures, you know, it's hard to believe. And as many people have noted on this day, there's a sense among the people in the United States that there has to be retribution for this. The death toll alone is going to be staggering. We've been warned about that. No one even knows, no one can even estimate. Although United States officials say there have been no credible claims of responsibility for Tuesday's attacks in New York City and Washington. And they remind everyone it's still too early to speculate about exactly who may be involved. Still, some U.S. intelligence officials are telling CNN there are good indications, that's their words, that people linked to Saudi exile Osama bin Laden might be responsible. As the World Trade Center burned furiously, smoke billowed above the Pentagon, and the White House was evacuated, one security expert declared, "This isn't an act of terrorism, this is an act of war." Noting there was no direct evidence, several experts pointed out that few terrorist organizations around the world were capable of mounting such an audacious attack. They mentioned only one man by name, a name repeated by U.S. officials for years.
There is not the slightest doubt that Osama bin Laden, his worldwide allies, and his sympathizers are planning further attacks against us. Despite progress against his networks, bin Laden's organization has contacts virtually worldwide, including in the United States, and he has stated unequivocally that all Americans are targets.
For almost a decade, Osama bin Laden has been accused or suspected of coordinating attacks on the United States, on U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, in the suicide mission against the USS Cole, at the World Trade Center in 1993, and the list goes on. Terrorism experts paint a picture of bin Laden as a Saudi-born revolutionary determined to end U.S. involvement in Saudi Arabia. In interviews, bin Laden has renewed his vow to bring jihad or holy war against the United States. Specifically, he said Washington had failed to get the message from bombings aimed at U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia.
We declared a jihad, a holy war, against the United States government because it is unjust, criminal, and tyrannical.
Terrorism analysts warned earlier this year Osama bin Laden was turning his attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, hoping to win armed converts and gain global political momentum out of the chaos of the collapsed peace process. Bin Laden's wealth, estimated by some at around $200 million, is seen as key to not only recruiting militant followers, but funding carefully planned and coordinated attacks. U.S. officials blame Osama bin Laden in the attacks on the U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which they say were carefully timed to increase the dramatic effects of a simultaneous onslaught against U.S. interests.
Get the cameras out of here, let's go! Get off, man!
It is precisely the same strategy that appears to be at work in the financial and political centers of America in the latest attacks. U.S. officials assert that bin Laden initiated his terrorist network during the war in Afghanistan, later moved to training bases in Sudan, and is currently being sheltered by Afghanistan's ruling Taliban. The Taliban say they have been warned the U.S. will hold Afghanistan responsible for any attack on U.S. interests linked to bin Laden.
There are governments like Afghanistan which are engaged in the smuggling of heroin and the harboring of terrorists. Governments such as Afghanistan, I think, have to be considered criminal organizations.
Sanctions against Afghanistan are already in place. U.S. missile strikes hit bin Laden's training facilities there in 1998, but missed the 44-year-old leader of an organization he simply calls the base. Earlier this year, reporters who visited bin Laden in Afghanistan said he appeared to be in a race against time, a race to see who could strike first, the United States or Osama bin Laden. It may be weeks or months before those behind what is apparently the worst terrorist strikes in the history of the U.S. are known. What is certain is that Osama bin Laden is already high on the list of suspects. One Arab journalist says Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he and his followers would carry out an unprecedented attack against the United States. He's joining us now. Abdul Bari Atwan, editor of the London-based Al-Quds newspaper, joining us from London. Tell us a little bit more about this warning. There have been many others, haven't there?
Well, actually, I believe this could be a work of consortium of many organizations, Islamic organizations, which they declared war against the United States. The anti-American feeling is very high now in the Middle East and the Muslim world because what's happening on the occupied territories, and many people accuse the United States of actually helping the Israeli and protecting them. So the groups like Bin Laden and other Islamic fundamentalists, actually, they would like to come out and say, look, you know, we are targeting United States. United States is supporting the Muslim and Arab enemies, which is the Israeli, and we are taking revenge of what's happening. So we learned from sources that, you know, they are really at work to hit the American target. But nobody expected that this target will be in New York itself or in the Pentagon. So the place of the attacks was surprising to everybody.
Abdul Bari, Osama bin Laden has been said to be really trying to turn Afghanistan not only into what he would term a pure Islamic state, but into a base where there are people who would support exporting, if you will, his brand of Islamic revolution.
Well, actually, you know, I interviewed Osama bin Laden on Afghanistan in November 1996, and I did see his camps and his followers there. You know, the man is ruthless, and you know, he believes that he should declare war against the United States. And this kind of appeal, this kind of call actually appealed to many young Muslims all over the world. And he recently managed to recruit a lot of those highly educated Arabs who were even educated in the United States itself and some Western countries. So I'm not surprised if he is surrounded with experts in different fields. And we noticed that the attack against the American destroyer Cole in the seaport of Aden was highly sophisticated attack, highly sophisticated on the bombing, the information gathering, and the monitoring of the movement of the American warships. So I'm not surprised if those highly intelligent people, highly educated people actually were behind the planning of the attacks against the World Trade Center.
You know, when people look at this and they see it in the narrow confines of one day, people saw Palestinians standing up and cheering these attacks in Nablus, in refugee camps in South Lebanon, where they've languished for half a century. When they look at that, on one hand, it creates a sense of anger. And there has to be a sense as well from some among the Arab world that this is not going to lead to an improvement in the situation, and certainly not a change in the U.S. position.
Jim, you are absolutely right, but we have to put into our consideration there are 300 million Arabs, and those people are very few who actually were dancing in the streets, whether in Nablus or in refugee camps in Lebanon. The Palestinians definitely will suffer because of these attacks, because they want the American involvement in the peace process to be revived. And they want the American to be the sponsor of the peace process and to intervene and put an end to the Israeli aggression against their people there. So we cannot say those people representing the Arabs, but you know, we have to ask our questions. You know, why America is targeted? Why the American people are targeted? Definitely there is something wrong in the American foreign policies. So these wrongs has to be readdressed, has to be rectified, and we want more involvement from the United States on the Arab-Israeli conflict to revive the peace process, to put an end to the Israeli atrocities. Also, there are Palestinians killed in the West Bank and Gaza Strip every day by the Israeli tanks, by the Israeli missiles. So we have to understand the frustration of some people, but this doesn't mean that we should support any terrorist acts against innocent Americans in New York and Washington, anywhere in the world. It is a terrorist act. Everybody condemned in the Middle East.
Abdul Bari Atwan of Al Quds, our thanks to you for being with us there. Colleen?
All right, Jim, thanks. I want to show you some tape again now that we're just getting in. We're just starting to get some nighttime footage rolling in of the efforts that are going on there. This is the rubble around the World Trade Center, and actually maybe I need to be corrected. That doesn't look like nighttime. Perhaps that's from earlier in the day. John, maybe you can just let me know for sure. Regardless, that is the rubble around the area of the World Trade Center. You can clearly see parts of building. All that dust that rained down, all the debris. In that debris, we saw earlier sheets of paper from the offices in there. Only a few floors of that building remaining standing. Still a fair bit of dust there. We saw in pictures from nighttime just a few minutes ago that a lot of that dust has settled. Rescue workers on the scene. There you see them there. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani saying 300 or more firefighters are missing, believed dead, and dozens of police officers as well. those pictures, obviously, from earlier of the rubble around the World Trade Center. Jim?
Devastation this day also in the nation's capital. Let's go now to the Pentagon, and Bob Franken live for an update on the situation there. Bob.
Well, it's been about 16 hours, Jim, since the explosion here, since the plane collided with this west side of the Pentagon, and you can see it's still smoldering a little bit. They're still waiting for the embers to stop going so they can actually go into the building. We saw just a moment ago some of the supervisors. They were lowered in what looked like a bucket. They were actually being lowered into the bombed out building where the plane had hit so they could take a look and just see what the status of the fire was. The plan is at daybreak to literally peel away the wall a little bit and then go in. Of course, about 15 hours ago, we had some video that was shot shortly after the plane had collided with this side of the building. You can see that there was quite a bit of firefighting effort going on. There were literally hundreds of firefighters going. They were trying to put out a blaze that's still going till now. They fought all day with this, and of course there was also an evacuation of the injured. We don't have any sense of the casualties yet. We've been told that they could number in the hundreds. There could be more than 100 dead. There are wide estimates. The Pentagon is not giving any estimate. Perhaps we'll know more tomorrow when officials are actually able to go inside the building. A plane, of course, collided shortly after 9:30 this morning. A plane that was flying from Dulles, and of course it was taken by hijackers. That is the report, of course, and was then moved into the Pentagon, causing the damage that it did. Now, people talk about retaliation, and the Pentagon is already thinking about that, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says that he will have the forces necessary.
I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think this is indeed a reminder of the tragedy and the tragic dangers that we face day in and day out, both here at home as well as abroad. I would tell you up front, I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
And tomorrow they will be ready to open the Pentagon. It's become a matter of pride here. At least they're going to be opening part of the building. The Defense Secretary said he's determined to do that to prove to the world that terrorism cannot knock down a building, cannot knock down the spirit of the American military. Jim?
Bob, the toll of dead and injured there at the Pentagon, does anyone know for sure?
As a matter of fact, the Pentagon is quite assertive about the fact that no estimates can be made. There was a local fire chief who said that the deaths could range between 100 and 800. Pentagon officials think that that is way too high, the 800 number, but it is clearly possible that there could be deaths that number in the hundreds.
All right, Bob Franken reporting there live from the Pentagon. Colleen?
All right, Jim, the attacks brought much of the United States to a halt as people watched events unfold transfixed. Schools, offices were closed. Highways across the country fell into gridlock as thousands of people returned to the sanctuary of their homes. But nowhere was the sense of shock so profound as in Manhattan. Greg Clarkin has that.
The terror attacks on the World Trade Center paralyzed New York and brought life to a standstill across America. Manhattan was sealed off minutes after the attacks on the Twin Towers. Tunnels and bridges closed. Subway and commuter rail service suspended. Hundreds of thousands of people staggering out of the financial district on foot on highways usually clogged with cars. Many scrambled to call loved ones only to find payphones and cell phones rendered useless. The World Trade Center was a major hub of telecom equipment, and call volumes swamped phone networks. Manhattan supermarkets were jammed and long lines formed at cash machines. New York City police precincts were sealed off, and an urgent plea for blood was issued as hospitals throughout the metropolitan area were pressed into service.
Right now, at last count, we were utilizing over 50. I think it'll be over 100 and that was as of a half hour ago. And we're utilizing all of the hospitals in New York City. We're utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey.
For the first time in United States history, airports across the country were shut down, and they'll stay that way until at least noon on Wednesday.
The Federal Aviation Administration ordered all airports closed, and all planes which were in the air were directed to land at the nearest airport. Transportation Secretary Mineta has directed the Federal Aviation Administration to suspend operations until at least noon tomorrow.
Amtrak canceled train service between New York and Boston. Greyhound canceled a big chunk of its service as well. Government buildings and businesses across the country were evacuated. Security tightened along the U.S. border with Mexico and Canada. NASA shut its centers down, and even some offshore oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico is suspended. Stock trading was canceled, and financial markets will be closed all day Wednesday. Major League Baseball canceled its schedule for the first time since FDR's death in 1945, and for only the 4th time in its history. The NFL is considering canceling Sunday's games. Across the U.S., tourist attractions and landmarks shut down. Disneyland, Disney World, and Seattle's Space Needle among them. Back in New York, the mayoral primary election was also canceled. Greg Clarkin, CNN, New York.
All right, for some insight now into how Americans view the attacks, CNN, USA Today, and Gallup conducted a public opinion poll just before the president's speech. 86% of those questions said they considered the events an act of war. But the majority agreed the U.S. military should not strike back until it is clear who is responsible for the attacks. And 78% said they were confident of President Bush's ability to handle this situation.
Some relatives of the people killed had to deal with this attack right as it was happening. A man on board one of the planes called his mother as the aircraft was being hijacked, and this is so upsetting, I can't tell you. Mark Bingham, a passenger on United Airlines Flight 93 that was en route from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. He called his mother just minutes before the plane crashed near Pittsburgh.
That I love you very, very much. In case I don't see you again.
I said that.
That the plane has been taken over by hijackers. And then I said, well, we love you very much too, Mark. Let me go get your mother.
I got on the phone, Mark, and he said, hi, Mom, this is Mark Bingham. Giving me his last name. And he said, I want to let you know that I love you. And I'm flying, I think he said, I'm in the air. I'm calling you on the air phone of the airplane.
In his seat?
I presume so. He said, I want you to know I love you very much, and I'm calling you from the plane. We've been taken over. There are 3 men that say they have a bomb. And I said, well, who are they, Mark? And he repeated that he loved me, and he said, I don't think he said, I don't know who they are. He became distracted there, as if someone was speaking to him, and he said it's something to the effect of, it's true, and then the phone went dead.
An emergency dispatcher in Pennsylvania, where United Flight 93 crashed, said that he received a call from a passenger on board the plane as well, and that man repeatedly said, we are being hijacked, we are being hijacked. Jim?
Millions of people all around the world remained riveted to their television screens for hours once they heard about the attacks. Ann McDermott has more on the U.S. public's reactions to what they were watching.
The pictures were just so insane that all these University of Southern California students could do was stare. But the younger ones had questions, lots of questions.
But when I first saw them in the news, I sort of wondered how protected we really are in America.
They'll be able to catch all the people involved.
Their teacher, for once, had no answers.
How? Why? These are the questions.
And here's one more.
Do you think anything like this would ever happen again?
Will it happen again? Psychologists say that's what can make people so crazy at first.
It's not that we're afraid of the unknown. In the face of the unknown, we fill it in. We think there are monsters out there, and we actually end up frightening ourselves more.
Many of these people in an LA area gym admitted they were frightened and came here only for something to do.
I'm looking at the streets and it looks like Beirut, and I can't believe it's my backyard.
The smoke continues to billow out of the Trade Center building 6 hours.
I think we're definitely going to go to war.
This Korean War vet sure hopes not, but he knows the feeling.
I see what it says right there. America under attack. People didn't have to die.
But they did die, and America's in mourning. Ann McDermott, CNN, Los Angeles.
All right, we are actually coming to the end of this hour of coverage of America Under Attack. It has been about 16 hours since all of this horror began. The attacks on New York and Washington Tuesday, September 11th will never be forgotten by those who experienced them firsthand or by the millions of people around the world who actually saw them unfold.
I heard the sound of a jet. I assumed it was like a Navy jet or something like that, just flying by.
And we heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere.
Then I heard a large explosion. I thought it was a sonic boom. And when I heard the explosion, I looked up, and what I saw was red, and I saw debris start to fall down.
As soon as you got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs burnt up. It's bad.
There was an enormous fireball. There was fire, debris falling to the ground, and then just a whole kind of mushroom of smoke that sort of just billowed up. And I just stood there in absolute disbelief.
There was a lot of people hurt. They were lying on the floors, coming down the stairs. A lot of people had asthma attacks while they were coming down. It was bad.
Everybody was screaming, everybody was running, the cops were trying to maintain the calm, and in that haste, people were stampeding. People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around and the second building just exploded.
And we see a second commercial jet flying extremely low actually collide into the south tower of the building. At that point, we decided just to get out of there. People were just going crazy at that point, evacuating.
I saw people jumping off the building. Many people just jumping.
And people were just climbing, they were just falling down. I saw about 6 people falling down from the building from the binoculars. I saw a lady with a black suit, she fell down, and a boy with a white shirt, he fell down, and it was horrible.
If you go over by there, you can see the people jumping out the window. They're jumping out the window right now. Oh my God.
Everybody was on top of each other trying to come down, and then somebody finally calmed the crowd down to get them to come down the stairs in an orderly fashion and get them out of the building.
We saw the south tower collapse to the ground, decimated, and then later it was very amazing to see the north tower standing there by itself after years and years and years of seeing them together. And then all of a sudden the north tower just collapsed upon itself and just fell to the ground. It was a cloud of dust that covered all of downtown Manhattan.
These New York policemen and firemen, God bless them, they kept us calm. They tried so hard to keep us moving north, and it was just absolute horror. It was horror.
Now, those are the words from the day America came under attack. Let's take a look at some of the pictures of the day, of the damage that has been done as a demarcation line is crossed, in the words of some, a line that separates past from future in the way that the U.S. is likely to deal with terrorism, and the realization, above all, that it is not isolated, that it is not safe because it is sheltered between 2 oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. Many people that you heard their voices there never believed they would see these kinds of scenes as a result of a deliberate act of violence. But that is indeed what was witnessed in New York City, in Washington on this day. People believing that the security that had been in place would prevent these kinds of scenes. The utter destruction of 2 of the landmark buildings in New York City at the very heart of the financial district, symbols of, as some would say, of capitalism, of America's financial strength. But they were laid low this day by 2 hijacked jetliners that were plowed into the side at a horrible cost in human life. The news continues now on CNN.
Cameras bear witness as one symbol of America's financial might burns, only to watch in horror as hijackers send a second deadly message to the United States.
And then, only half an hour later, another target, another city, this time the Pentagon, the military seat of the world's only remaining superpower.
And there was more to come. Plane number 4 goes down in rural Pennsylvania. Dozens of people killed. A nation, an entire world is stunned.
Hello, I'm Jim Clancy.
And I'm Colleen McEdwards at CNN Center. First, we want to bring you the latest right now on Tuesday's terrorist attacks in the United States. In New York City, it is 2 a.m. right now. Many lie dead where the World Trade Center lies in ruins. Some people trapped alive have been placing cell phone calls, we are told, quite possibly from the basement of that World Trade Center building. The combined death toll for New York, Washington, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania will be very high, we're told. President Bush saying earlier, thousands of people have been killed. In New York, search and rescue efforts have continued right through the night. Thus far, at least 2,000 victims treated for injuries. It was little more than 17 hours ago now that terrorists hijacked 4 commercial jets, crashing one of the airliners into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center, a financial mecca there for decades. Then only minutes later, slamming a second plane into the Trade Center South Tower. Obviously an extremely well-coordinated attack. Another jet into a section of Washington's Pentagon building, the military nerve center of the United States, causing a terrible fire there. And finally, the 4th aircraft into Pennsylvania's rural Somerset County. Those 3 attacks leaving behind a nightmare of horrendous proportion here.
The dimension will be very large. In terms of the people we're looking for, it's a couple of hundred firefighters and police officers, which is a staggering number. As far as the number of people in the building, that'll be in the thousands. But there's no way of knowing at this point, and we're going to keep praying and hoping that we save as many people as possible.
And in addition to the carnage, the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington effectively shut down both cities, suspended domestic flights at all U.S. airports. Those flights to be suspended, we're told, until tomorrow, at least around noontime. Jim?
Well, between 100 and 800 people are believed to have lost their lives when another suicide jetliner, if you want to call that, slammed into the Pentagon. 64 people were killed aboard the hijacked Boeing 757 as it plowed into the headquarters of the U.S. Defense Department. 24,000 people work at the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was in his office at the very time of the impact. He briefly was helping out with the rescue operation. CNN national correspondent Bob Franken will be joining us with more from the Pentagon in just a matter of a few minutes. All right, as we continue to cover the situation, we know that the 100 and 800 people were in the Pentagon. We know also that there were a number of people on board another aircraft that went down. We want to take a look at some of the events as they happened throughout the day, a tick-tock, if you will, of the events as they unfolded. Astonishing, many Americans, astonishing people all around the world as they watched the explosions, as they heard the events unfolding. Bill Hemmer giving us now a look back at the day the U.S. President. All right, we're going to go, I am told now we're going to go to New York. Garrett Utley is standing by there with some thoughts from the middle of the night in the city that never sleeps. Garrett?
Jim, the figures we've been able to report that have been more or less given to us by city officials here in terms of casualties really only concern city employees, firemen and policemen and women. 80 or more policemen and women believed to be missing and probably lost tragically. 300 and perhaps more than 300 members of the New York City Fire Department lost. 300 entire units, the elite rescue teams, number 1, rescue team number 2, rescue team number 4, were in the towers. They're disappeared, they're lost. Tonight, we see some of the first video coming out. The giant searchlights have been brought in, run on generators there in lower Manhattan, around the area where the towers collapsed. Indeed, the 3rd building collapsed in that neighborhood too earlier this evening. The rescue efforts are underway, but it's going to be a long, long process. And of course, when we look at this scene tonight, what we remember and what shocks us and touches us is that here in New York, it was a day that started really so peacefully.
It was such a beautiful morning. The air was clear over Manhattan, the sky a rich blue.
The two twin towers stood tall, anchored in bedrock of granite, so secure, so unshakable. And then, we have seen smoke and destruction before, but we've never seen madness like this, or catastrophe like this. It was a morning when words could only begin to express the horror.
It was like a blizzard, but a blizzard that wasn't cold, a blizzard that had no wind. It was just hot.
There was an enormous fireball. There was fire, debris falling to the ground, and then just a whole kind of mushroom of smoke that sort of just billowed up.
We knew that some of what happened this morning, that there could be another attack on the World Trade Center as there was 8 years ago, that terrorists might attack the Pentagon and hijack commercial flights. But how could we imagine that all this could happen? That much of the government would be shut down, the capital of the United States evacuated, and the White House, that the president of the most powerful nation in the world would take evasive action for his own security. Across this nation, from airports closed down to home to workplace, we watched and tried to comprehend what we were seeing. It took time after the shock of the terror to digest the dimension of the human tragedy. We tried to imagine what those caught in the soaring towers, in the doomed planes in the Pentagon went through. Before the end, we can only wonder what happens next. The president vows action.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice.
Retaliation, even revenge, may feel sweet one day, but right now there are only the remnants of terror, the pain of the tragedy, and the tears. And how do we
handle those tears and the trauma tonight for the victims, their families in Washington and here in New York City? Frank Donahue is with the disaster relief units of the American Red Cross. You've been down there today. Tonight, there's the logistics. Housing people, how many?
Tonight we have about 13 shelters. The Greater New York Red Cross has 13 shelters open in Lower Manhattan.
These are for people in buildings in the endangered
that have been evacuated, Battery Park, etc., where apartments, just people cannot return to that area tonight at all. It's too dangerous.
And you're feeding about 10,000 meals down there?
Working with the Salvation Army, feeding about 10,000 police and firefighters and disaster workers on the scene tonight.
These are the immediate problems. We've seen the medical problems, the scenes in the hospital, emotional problems, psychological counseling. You get involved in that too.
Absolutely.
Who does it and what do they do?
We have trained, certified volunteers that are certified psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers that are trained by the Red Cross that we have tonight that are working in Lower Manhattan, that are working at our center on Amsterdam, and that are working actually at LAX, at Boston's Logan Airport, at every airport where people were affected by today's disaster.
And what are the patterns? What are the key things these counselors, these therapists really can do?
Immediate assistance to people, to be there when they hear incredible news that someone that they love very much may well be in that rubble that we see behind us, and to be there to provide solace, to kind of provide direction to them, to help them make it through the first couple hours.
This is psychological, emotional first aid,
absolutely,
if you will.
Absolutely.
What happens after tomorrow, or the day after, or next week with these people?
Red Cross's role is to be there again immediately on the scene to provide that initial, that first aid, if you will. We'll begin to then refer people to their clergy, etc., and other kind of long-term help.
We see again the people in the wheelchair, the people on the gurneys today, and we can only think of those who are still under the rubble. You've been to Bosnia? Been earthquakes in Turkey?
Turkey 2 years ago, the earthquake, and it's the same kind of eerie feeling when I came through the Holland Tunnel today from Philadelphia. And I got down there and listened to that sort of dead silence that you see, and to see relief workers and hundreds of firefighters just waiting to be called in to respond. I saw it in so many places, and now to see it in America, it's pretty shocking.
Shortages. We've heard about blood. Need blood?
Absolutely. 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. every American could give blood. We never want our country to have a blood shortage again. This is a sign to all of us. We should never have a blood shortage in this nation.
And in a crisis like this situation we're going through tonight and we'll go through tomorrow, what are the other shortages? Not enough doctors, not enough ambulances, what?
Not enough volunteers, people to continue to provide relief. This operation will go on for many, many weeks. The folks in Battery Park and those neighborhoods are going to continue to need assistance. And Red Cross will be there tonight in other parts of New York responding to the regular disasters that you see. And so volunteers, blood, financial resources, all of those things are what Red Cross needs, and so many organizations like the Red Cross need to continue to be there when people need us.
Have we ever had this kind of a disaster calamity in the United States?
This is monumental.
Even more than the natural ones? The
Absolutely. I mean, certainly the hurricanes, the floods, the things that we've seen in this country are devastating, and people are stunned, but this is overwhelming to think that this has been inflicted upon America by who knows who, but that in moments, what you saw in the beginning of the scene of how beautiful and serene New York was, and now look at this tonight.
And it'll be there tomorrow.
Absolutely.
For days to come. Frank Donahue of the Red Cross,
thank you so much, Garrett.
Back to you, Jim and Colleen.
All right, Garrett Cutley, thanks very much for that. Let's move now from New York to the seat of U.S. military defense, the Pentagon. At the Pentagon, the hijacked airliner that hit that building at 9:38 a.m. ignited a huge fire there. Firefighters battled that blaze all day to try to bring it under control. Now rescuers are searching for up to 800 missing people there. CNN's Bob Franken joins us now from the Pentagon with the very latest. Bob?
Colleen, let me put that figure in perspective if I could just a little bit. That is an estimate, a real wide-ranging estimate from one local fire chief who said there could be between 100 and 800 dead. That was just his estimate. Pentagon sources are saying that's probably wildly high, but they have been insistent that they were not going to release any casualties until the people who you see in back of me, the ones who have been watching this blaze throughout the evening, are in fact going to go into the building. You can see aerials that show just the magnitude of the damage that was done here, aerials that were shot by a Washington station, WTTG. You should understand this is a massively huge building, over 17 miles of corridors. About half of them, by the way, will be closed tomorrow because of concerns of structural damage, although officials here say they are insistent. They want to open this building and at least have some of the workers in to make a statement to the world that the U.S. military establishment has taken a hit, but it is not down. And as a matter of fact, already there's some preliminary planning going on for retaliation once the person or the organization or the nation that is going to be deemed responsible is identified. And there was quite a bit of work done in this building today, quite a few public appearances, including one by the ranking Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee, John Warner.
We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack.
As I mentioned, the firefighters and the rescue people in the back here are in a holding pattern right now, waiting for the rest of the flames to go out. The plan is at daybreak to start peeling away the section that was hit by the airplane and to go in and see just how really serious the damage was inside. Damage, of course, that we can see is pretty much catastrophic. Colleen?
And Bob, do you have any more information about what was in that section of the damaged building? What kind of work went on there?
Well, actually, it was fortunate in a way in that none of the vital offices are located in that section. You had some Army offices here, you had some Navy offices here, but the Military Command Center, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the various secretaries, including, of course, Secretary Rumsfeld, were in other parts of the building. But as I mentioned, about half of the building is going to be closed tomorrow because of a concern, not just in the direct area that was hit, but other areas there may have been structural damage which could make it fairly dangerous to be there. Colleen?
Understood. CNN's Bob Franken at the Pentagon. Thanks. Jim?
Colleen, we haven't talked as much about the fourth hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 93. It crashed south of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania. Administration officials saying the presidential retreat at Camp David may have been the target. Now, David Mattingly joins us from the crash site with more on the investigation underway there. David?
Jim, Pennsylvania state troopers tonight have the crash site secured, treating it for the moment as a crime scene. Yesterday afternoon, the FBI clearly taking charge of the investigation. According to people in the area, the plane was flying at a very low altitude when there was a rush of engine noise. At that time, the plane then turned and plunged at a 45-degree angle, crashing into a field which is part of a strip mining operation near the town here of Shanksville. FBI confirms there were 38 passengers and 7 crewmen on board. No survivors. There are only small pieces of debris to be found at the scene. At the crash site, there is an impact crater. It appears as a blackened pit on the edge of a green grassy field. A key find will be the black box, the flight recorder. There are also reports the FBI is examining a 911 call originating from a passenger on the plane taken by a 911 operator at a neighboring county here in Pennsylvania. They hope, among so many other things, to find out why this hijacked plane failed to reach its target. And as you said earlier, government sources are now saying that senior administration officials told Congress they believe the plane was headed for either the White House, Camp David, or the Capitol building. Authorities here today asked anyone in the area who saw the plane in the air or going down to come forward and contribute to the investigation. As for what's going on right now, things are wrapped up for the evening and the investigation will get underway in the morning. Back to you in Atlanta.
All right, David, as we look at the crash scene there, it's a scene that people don't really understand. You've outlined, they don't really have anyone that eyewitnessed this. I had thought that earlier in the day there had been a report of someone describing what had happened as the plane came down.
Oh yes, there were eyewitnesses, but they're calling for anyone who may have seen the plane in the air to come forward. They have the initial accounts, as we have relayed to you, that the plane appeared to have a rush of engine noise and then veer off and then down, striking the ground at a 45-degree angle. There were policemen at the scene of the crash site saying that it appeared that the plane had come down and the debris had scattered into a wooded area nearby. And again, the pieces of debris are very small. We do have some good news for you tonight, though, with a Pennsylvania connection to this horrible attack. At 7:56 p.m., a man and 2 police officers trapped in the World Trade Center were unable to get through to 911 in New York and call for help. So the man called his sister in the Pittsburgh area, who then called her local 911. They were then able to direct police in New York to their location and to their successful rescue. And to quote one 911 official here, a very positive note to a sad and tragic day.
All right, David Mattingly reporting to us there from Pennsylvania, latest on that investigation. Now, a man who was on board one of the flights that was doomed, that flight that we're talking about in Pennsylvania, called his mother as the aircraft was being hijacked. Mark Bingham had boarded United Airlines Flight 93 in Newark, New Jersey. He called his mother in the San Francisco Bay Area just before the plane crashed near Pittsburgh.
That I love you very, very much in case I don't see you again.
I said that.
That the plane has been taken over by hijackers. And then I said, well, we love you very much too, Mark. Let me go get your mother.
I got on the phone, Mark, and he said, hi, Mom, this is Mark Bingham. Give me his last name. And he said, I want to let you know that I love you. And I'm flying. I think he said I'm in the air. I'm calling you on the air phone of the airplane.
In his seat.
I presume so. He said, I want you to know I love you very much, and I'm calling you from the plane. We've been taken over. There are 3 men that say they have a bomb. And I said, well, who are they, Mark? And he repeated that he loved me, and he said, I don't think he said, I don't know who they are. He became distracted there, as if someone was speaking to him, and he said, it's something to the effect of, it's true. And then the phone went dead.
All right, and one person on one of the flights, also a man, actually had the presence of mind to phone emergency personnel from his cell phone to report, to say we are being hijacked. Let's take a look at a night shot right now, the Manhattan skyline as it looks at this moment. Live pictures now of the skyline. You can still see dust and smoke in that area amid the lights of New York, a city that by all accounts will never be the same again, not just in terms of its skyline, its landscape, but in terms of the sensibilities of the people who live in it and who live in this country. Financial markets around the world have been reacting to this morning. You can imagine how the attack has unnerved global financial markets that are already fearful of recession. Asia opening today with quite a downturn. Richard Quest is in London with more on that and all the international tenants who are at this World Trade Center as well. Richard, quite a few in that enormous building where some 50,000 people would go to work every day.
Absolutely. There were some 435 tenants from around 26 countries from across the globe. There were offices from just a small suite of offices anywhere in the building to large banks that had several floors with employees. Taking a look at some of the international companies that had offices and had a presence in World Trade Center 1 and 2. There was the British company Thomson Financial, which had offices in the World Trade Center. Morgan Stanley, the largest tenant, had over 22 floors in World Trade Center 1. The company put out a statement late yesterday saying all of the businesses are functioning and will continue to function, but obviously the prayers and sympathies are with their employees. Some 3,500 people worked for Morgan Stanley at World Trade Center. Cantor Index, and a company on both sides of the Atlantic, Cantor Fitzgerald, as it's known, had 5 floors. 800 employees at least were working or had a presence in the World Trade Center. The company putting out its statement saying that over 1,000 employees employed by the two companies in the World Trade Center. The chairman saying, in a difficult, confused situation, we're doing all we can to determine the whereabouts of our colleagues. Keefe Bruyette, a brokerage specializing in banking matters, also there. Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield, that's the US major insurance corporation. The healthcare insurance was an international corporation that had a presence in the World Trade Center. And Credit Suisse First Boston, the Swiss multinational, one of the largest in the world, the banking, investment banking, trading organizations. Not only does it have other offices within Manhattan, but had a large presence in the World Trade Center. And Oppenheimer Funds. These are just a short list, if you like, of some of the major names that had offices, some small suites, others large numbers of floors, like Morgan Stanley in the World Trade Center. Now, joining me on the line is Bob Hormats. Robert Hormats is Vice Chairman of Goldman Sachs International. Their offices are on Broad Street by the New York Stock Exchange, but not that far from the World Trade Center. Bob, thanks for joining us. First of all, let's start with Goldman Sachs, your employees, and what you can tell us about the situation.
Well, we stayed open until about 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon yesterday. Fortunately, we're fairly far away, as you know, from the Trade Center, but our prayers and our thoughts are with our friends and colleagues in other banks and institutions. Wall Street is, as you know, a pretty close-knit unit, and they're competitors, but they're also companies we cooperate with on a day-to-day basis at the same time. So we're obviously very concerned about those people in other firms that are down on Wall Street, and we're in the World Trade Towers.
The size, the scale of what's taken place in terms of Wall Street, in terms of the economy, we can have no idea yet what's likely to be the effect.
No, that's right, and I think it'll take time to sink in. It's a community that, as I say, works together. We know one another. We work on a day-to-day basis with one another, and firms work on a whole lot of projects collectively and trade with one another, and there's all sorts of business going on a day-to-day basis, and it's part of of an overall market. They're part of a market, but they're also friends and people we talk to on a day-to-day basis. So the psychological impact is going to be enormous. And the financial impact is going to be enormous. A lot of companies that have been active participants in the market will be hurt, damaged badly.
Let me just interrupt you. We're looking at new pictures now of the rubble from the scene of Lower Manhattan that have just come into CNN. These shots taken a short while ago. Bob, finally, briefly, the financial community has had words from the Federal Reserve, from the US Treasury Secretary. The key now has to be to create confidence, not only that there won't be a cash shortage or a so-called credit crunch, that basically this will not do long-standing damage to the economy.
Yes, I think there are two major things that need to be done. First of all, in the United States itself, the Federal Reserve has to take action to lower interest rates further and do so very aggressively, and I believe it will. And second, from a financial point of view, we have to now realize that some additional fiscal stimulus is going to be required. There'll be more defense spending, perhaps a tax cut. The idea of utilizing the Social Security surplus to retire bonds, the so-called lockbox, is finished. There's going to be a lot more fiscal stimulus to boost the economy and boost confidence. And the developed countries, the G7 particularly, have to work together to restore confidence by showing that they're working together on this. It's not just one country. It's the overall financial world that needs to have confidence restored, and the G7 leaders need to do that together.
Bob Hormats of Goldman Sachs, Vice Chairman of Goldman Sachs, many thanks indeed. Colleen, the pictures from Lower Manhattan, the latest of the rubble from the World Trade Center.
Yeah, and some astonishing pictures, Richard, as we look at these just in. We've seen windows blown out of police cars. We've actually seen cars on top of each other in that area in Lower Manhattan. These pictures just coming into us now of the search and rescue as it goes on tonight, right now as we speak. Jim?
And as you look at those scenes, there are a lot of people that want to see someone arrested, someone brought to justice or made to pay for what happened in the United States this day. But how in the world do you begin a criminal investigation into something like you've seen here? And who do you focus on as a suspect? Our David Insert takes a preliminary look at those issues.
U.S. officials say fugitive Saudi-accused terrorist Osama bin Laden's group is at the top of their list of suspects. There are good indications people with links to bin Laden may have been responsible for this attack, said one, including specific intelligence. In Afghanistan, however, where bin Laden is a guest of the Taliban government, the foreign minister told reporters, quote, "We have tried to assure the United States in any kind of way we can that Osama is not involved in these kinds of activities." One U.S. intelligence official responded angrily, calling that, quote, a lie.
I think we will soon be able to identify who the culprit is, but tonight is not the night.
Intelligence and law enforcement professionals say, though bin Laden is at the top of the list of suspects, involvement of agents of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein or of individuals associated with Palestinian groups or Hezbollah cannot be entirely ruled out yet, especially given the size and complexity of the operation.
We may find that this particular action involved actors from several different sources.
On Capitol Hill, some members said the Central Intelligence Agency needs to do a better job of infiltrating terrorist groups.
This obviously was a failure of great dimension. We had no specific warning of the United States being attacked, although people have alluded to that before. We've got to do better. We must do better.
At the Central Intelligence Agency, officials point out that no one hears of their successes, only their failures, though they concede bitterness at failing to obtain advance warning of the attacks on New York and Washington. They note CIA Director George Tenet has repeatedly warned the bin Laden group could strike the U.S. at any time. As for how to respond once culprits are found, terrorist experts were relieved to hear the White House say the bombing of Kabul was not U.S. retaliatory missiles, but apparently Afghan rebels.
This is not something that's going to be solved by a salvo of cruise missiles bouncing some rocks in Afghanistan if it turns out to be Osama bin Laden. This will be a war ultimately to bring all of those responsible to justice, whatever form that takes.
It's clear now, as it was on December 7th, 1941, the United States is at war. The question is with whom? In December of 41 we knew. Today we really don't.
They don't know now, but U.S. intelligence officials say they believe they soon will. David Ensor, CNN, Washington.
Now, key to all of this is the fact that Osama bin Laden has been in Afghanistan. Afghan officials, the ruling Taliban there, have said unequivocally that they have been warned by Washington that they will be held responsible if it was determined that Osama bin Laden took actions, did terrorist acts against the United States or its interests. Now, joining us from Kabul for more on this story is Nick Robertson. He's joining us by video phone. Nick, what is the latest from there?
Well, Jim, certainly there is a lot of apprehension within senior Taliban ranks here in Afghanistan, not only in Kabul, but in their spiritual capital, Kandahar, about 300 miles south of here. We also know this morning in Kabul that the United Nations agencies here in Kabul are preparing very likely to pull out from here. Local staff are being paid their salaries, and there will probably likely be a skeleton staff of UN officials left in the city and in other cities around the country. We also know that some of the smaller non-governmental organizations, aid groups here in the city, are also preparing to pull out. 10 German groups, we are told, will pull out, 4 of them today. Last night, of course, the Taliban moving very swiftly. Foreign Minister Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil talking to journalists saying that they were not responsible, Afghanistan was not responsible, that they condemned terrorism in all its forms, and they said that Osama bin Laden couldn't be responsible for what had happened. Mullah Omar, the spiritual leader of the country, issuing a statement very quickly as well, Jim, indicative of the apprehension that possibly Afghanistan could be a place where retribution might be sought. But certainly Mullah Omar's statement, Osama bin Laden, he said, could not be responsible. This type of terrorism, he said, was too great for one man, Jim.
Still, the feeling persists that there is going to be some kind of retribution by the United States, and we could see the reaction coming there from Taliban officials. How many of them in the government are what you might consider supporters of Osama bin Laden? That is, they agree with him, his philosophy.
Well, the Taliban have given sanctuary to Osama bin Laden, they say, for his war efforts in expelling the 1980s Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, a 10-year occupation. Osama bin Laden came here and fought with the Mujahideen. And for that reason, when Osama bin Laden came to the Taliban in 1996 looking for a safe haven, they felt honor-bound under Afghan culture, they say, to give him a place to stay. Certainly, Osama bin Laden is a figurehead, not only in Afghanistan, but in this part of the world. He is somebody that some young followers of Islam might look towards as a particular type of leader that they behold. Certainly, as the Taliban prosecute their war to gain the control of the last 5% of Afghanistan, a civil war in the north of the country here, having an ally like Osama bin Laden to help rally more troops to their cause. This is a war of attrition, the civil war here, Jim. Many troops die on the front line, frontal assaults, troops driving across open plains being mowed down. The Taliban do need a lot of troops here to fight this war. Osama bin Laden and his supporters would certainly be a good rallying point for Taliban in trying to recruit people to that army. And certainly we have seen this in some instances, Jim.
Nick, there have been reports that Osama bin Laden is calling Muslims from around the world to join his forces in Afghanistan to support the country, even export out of Afghanistan some of the same fundamentalist beliefs that he holds. Do you see evidence of that?
Well, Jim, 2 years ago, we were traveling in the north of Afghanistan in territory held by the Northern Alliance, who are the last opposition holding out against the Taliban. There, we were taken to a jail and shown prisoners they told us were from mostly from Pakistan, one gentleman from Britain, and several others, some from China, some from other countries. These people told us that they had come to learn how to fight in training camps in Afghanistan, and had then gone on to the front lines to fight in the war against the Northern Alliance, and that's why they were captured when the front lines changed. These people have told us other supporters, other fighters, other terrorists, some people might call them, frontline fighters, the Taliban would call them, told us that they'd come to Afghanistan to get training in fighting techniques, in techniques of using explosives, in techniques of using weapons, rocket launchers, machine guns, etc. They'd then taken those skills to the front line for the Taliban, but they said they were also quite capable of taking those skills and exporting them back to their own countries of origin. Certainly the predominance of the people in that jail we found were mostly from Pakistan, and it has been well documented that the Taliban are able to draw ethnically from the Pashtun population in Pakistan a considerable degree of support, and there is a wealth of evidence that would point to the fact that there are many young people that would come from Pakistan to assist the Taliban in their fight in Afghanistan.
All right, our thanks there to Nick Robertson, one of the few correspondents in Afghanistan that is at the moment one of the focal points of attention. Colleen? All
right, Jim, we do want to show you some more fresh pictures that are just coming into CNN now. This is tape, but it's quite fresh from the area in Lower Manhattan around the World Trade Center. Our crew's out there busy tonight giving us a look at the search and rescue efforts which go on. You can see really the utter devastation there, just twisted pieces of metal and rubble. Take a look at that panning up shot. Let's just listen to this for a while. You can see still plenty of steam and smoke in that area. Let's have a listen here. Most of that damage on the ground, of course, caused when the two towers literally disintegrated. They burned and fell to the ground, one after the other, just spewing rubble all over the place. I want to also show you some tape that we just got in a couple of hours here. This is exclusive, a reverse angle of the second plane hitting the tower. Let's look.
That's just a frightening shot.
Officials saying it's the fire that caused the buildings to disintegrate relatively quickly. You can imagine both very large planes carrying a lot of fuel, literally pumping that fuel right into those two towers.
These planes fully loaded with fuel. Yep. Every one of these planes was hijacked. All four of them was bound for a transcontinental flight, meaning they were fully loaded. Bombs, literally, petrol bombs that were plowed there into the World Trade Center and then also, of course, into the Pentagon.
All right, and also late in the day yesterday, we also saw some naval movements, some movements of naval ships, and CNN's Jean Meserve is in Washington right now. She's got some new information about this. Jean?
That's right, Colleen. We talked earlier today about the movement of forces along the East Coast. Now we have information about the movement of naval assets on the West Coast. They are being moved to protect the West Coast and also Hawaii, according to Navy officials. Let me tell you what's being deployed. An aircraft carrier, 2 guided missile cruisers, 5 guided missile destroyers, 5 guided missile frigates, a rescue and salvage ship, and a fleet oiler. All of those vessels based on the West Coast. Once again, those being deployed along the West Coast and some further out, one presumes, to protect Hawaii. Earlier today, a couple of aircraft carriers left Norfolk, Virginia. They were deployed along with some other ships with the intention of protecting the East Coast. The aircraft carriers in particular, it was hoping could monitor and help control the airspace over both New York and Washington, D.C. And another note, the USS Enterprise, which had been relieved of duty in the Persian Gulf, has now been told it must stay there. So that's the latest on military assets and how they are being put in place early this morning. Also here in Washington, another item. We have seen that the entrances to 3 of Washington's major tourist attractions have been closed to vehicular traffic. The Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, and the Lincoln Memorial have now all been blocked effectively to vehicles. Unclear whether they have also been blocked to pedestrian traffic, since at this hour of the morning there is none for us to monitor. This does not come as a surprise. There is a state of emergency here in the District of Columbia. Much of the city was cordoned off for portions of the day. Certainly around the U.S. Capitol today, blocks and blocks were closed. Vehicles had to divert for blocks to get around that building. So there are a few of the updates from the city itself. Across the river in Virginia at the Pentagon, rescue efforts do continue at this hour. You can see there a live picture of what's going on. Plans are for in the morning to peel away part of the facade of this building and go in and do a thorough search. Arlington County officials have told us that the toll at the Pentagon could go as high as 800, 100 to 800, the range of people missing at the Pentagon. So that is the latest here from Washington. Now back to you in Atlanta.
All right, Jean Meserve, thank you very much. Condolences have been pouring in from around the world tonight. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has expressed his condolences to the American people. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat has also condemned the attacks. For more now on the reaction in the Middle East, we are joined from Jerusalem by Gerald Kessel. Gerald?
Good morning, Colleen. And for Israelis, it's as they watch the horror unfolding in New York and Washington, the equation is horrifyingly simple. Not so much just an attack on America as Israelis perceive it, but somewhat akin to this headline that we have here in the leading Israeli newspaper, which talks of a world in shock, because the way the Israelis see it is that this is a question, a day of reckoning, a day to stand up and be counted on which side anyone is in the battle, as they say, against terrorism, for or against. And there are no neutrals, say Israeli leaders. This is a day in which it should be made plain that there's no place for terrorists to have a haven or to seek a sanctuary.
The fight against terror is an international struggle of the free world against the forces of darkness who seek to destroy our liberty and our way of life. I believe that together we can defeat these forces of evil. At this most difficult hour, all Israelis stand as one with the American people. Our hearts are with you, and we are ready to provide any assistance at any time. The government of Israel has declared a day of mourning tomorrow as we bow our heads and share in the sorrow of the American people.
Along with the day of mourning, Israelis have been asked to donate blood, and people have been going to medical relief centers to donate blood, which will be sent along with the emergency rescue squads. The Israelis have a couple of such squads who have specialized in handling incidents such as the collapse of buildings, like as they did when they sent a squad to Nairobi after the bombing of the U.S. embassy there. Israel also taking its own security precautions, the airspace closed to all foreign aircraft or other than those that have have Israeli security clearance, the Israeli Air Force on high alert, and other efforts to make sure that security has been tightened. On the Palestinian side, the Palestinians, like leaders throughout the Arab world, have expressed condemnation and have expressed their solidarity with the American people and this in the hour of trial. Here's what Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat had to say to CNN last night.
لقد صدمت وصدم شعبنا الفلسطيني.
The Palestinian people and I were shocked.
وشعرنا بالألم العميق من جراء هذا الحدث الخطير.
We felt a deep pain as a result of this extremely dangerous act.
الذي أصاب عددا من المؤسسات الأمريكية.
Which hurt many American institutions.
وأوقع العديد من الضحايا الأبرياء من أبناء الشعب الأمريكي الصديق.
And caused many casualties among the friendly American people.
الضحايا الأبرياء.
Innocent American victims.
إننا ندين هذا العمل الإجرامي الأليم.
We condemn this criminal, painful act.
ونعرب عن تعاطفنا مع أسر الشهداء الضحايا.
We express our sympathy to the families of the victims.
ولقد أرسلت رسالة لفخامة الرئيس بوش.
I have sent President Bush a message of condolences.
معبرا عن مشاعري ومشاعر الشعب الفلسطيني الأليمة بهذا الحدث المروع.
In which I have expressed my and the Palestinian people's sad feelings in regard of this horrible act.
ووضعت فيها إمكانياتنا المتواضعة تحت تصرفه في هذه المحنة الصعبة.
I also conveyed to His Excellency our readiness to put all of our humble capabilities at his disposal at this time of sorrow.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
And the Palestinian leader also denounced certain scenes that were on display in the streets here in East Jerusalem. A small number of people who were showing their support for that action, those terror actions in the United States. Also in the town of Nablus on the West Bank. Here they were in Jerusalem. There were only a small crowd, but there was a crowd of several thousand in the town of Nablus, where cries of God is great and support for the terror actions against the United States. The distribution by people of candy, a traditional show of a sentiment of support and of delight. That very much a reflection of the anti-U.S. sentiment that has been spreading throughout the Middle East because of the United States' perceived support of Israel in the ongoing year-long now bloody confrontation. And indeed that confrontation has been deepening overnight with some intense fighting around the town of Jenin in the northern part of the West Bank. A number of Palestinians reported killed in that intense fighting.
All right, Gerald Kessel updating us from Jerusalem. Thanks, Jim.
Well, along with the condolences that are pouring in, there are also questions being asked, and one of those questions is how were the hijackers able to board the plane in the first place? We get more on that and the situation with airport security from Charles Feldman.
When TWA Flight 800 exploded after taking off from Kennedy Airport in 1996, U.S. transportation officials were already at work revising domestic aviation security. New screening measures at airports were put into effect. Passengers were required to show picture IDs. All this, even though TWA 800 turned out not to be an act of terrorism. So, how could 4 airliners be hijacked on the very same day? The fact is, terrorism experts say, there is no realistic way to stop terrorists bent on a suicide mission. Terrorism expert Brian Jenkins.
Years ago, I was asked by a congressman, Mr. Jenkins, if I gave you all of the resources that you wanted and all the authority that you needed, could you guarantee that there would not be another hijacking? My answer was, yes, sir, I can. we ground all of the airplanes.
Making matters worse, when various government agencies and news organizations test airport security around the nation, it often comes up short. Published reports from 1999 show that Boston's Logan Airport, from which 2 of the hijacked planes originated, had at least 136 security violations over a 2-year period, this when federal aviation agents tested security there. And just this July, the Transportation Department announced it was seeking almost $100,000 in penalties against American Airlines for having lax security on at least 6 flights checked by special agents. American, which had 2 of its planes hijacked in the attacks, says the proposed fine covered alleged procedural failures involving checked baggage and not failures at security checkpoints. So what happened to all the heightened security?
It's not that the measures are at fault. It is that over a period of time, absent a major threat, there is always the temptation to do business as usual and to forget for a moment that this threat is real, remains real.
But at least for the near future, business will certainly not be as usual.
There will be higher levels of surveillance, more stringent searches. Airport curbside luggage check-in will no longer be allowed. There will be more security officers and random identification checks.
But we are a nation that likes to move fast. We are impatient with long lines and security checkpoints that slow our travel down. So, if history is any lesson, security over time will again get lax. Terrorists can count on it. Charles Feldman, CNN, Los Angeles.
Now, it probably is not difficult to gauge the mood of the American people at a time like this. Gallup pollsters did that Tuesday afternoon, though, making telephone calls that no one ever imagined would be necessary. Joining us now from Princeton, New Jersey is pollster Frank Newport with more on that. Frank?
Indeed, Jim, this was our poll together with a scientific sample, the immediate reactions of the American public taken Tuesday night, the 11th of September. We've heard the term on a lot of this coverage, war. We ask Americans, do you consider this an act of war or not? Evidence is pretty clear, as you can see here. 86%, almost 9 out of 10 Americans agree that it is an act of war. However, when it comes to military response, we do get a sense of restraint from the American public. We offered 3 possible alternatives for retaliation: immediate strikes against known terrorist operations, even if we don't know exactly who did it. The middle alternative was strike, but only after evidence of exactly who did it, even if that takes months, and no military action at all. Obviously, Americans want military action, but look at this. Significant majority of Americans say wait until it's known exactly who did it, then military action. The reaction emotionally, we've seen in a lot of the coverage, is very, very strong. In fact, we find here that 87%, almost 90% of Americans, including a lot of older Americans who lived through Pearl Harbor, tell us this is the most tragic news event that they have witnessed in their life. Worry about themselves or their family being involved in terrorist activities, that's up. We've tracked that measure, unfortunately, going back to Oklahoma City. It was 42% then in the mid-90s. It had fallen. Just last night, you can see 58% of Americans say they're at least somewhat worried about the possibility of a terrorist attack. Finally, confidence in President Bush to handle the situation is high, very and somewhat confident. We've got almost 8 out of 10 Americans expressing confidence that he will handle the situation. Jim, that's an update on the immediate reaction of the American public. Back to you.
All right, Frank, thank you for that report. Colleen.
All right, Jim, thanks. Well, relief agencies say that they are rushing blood supplies both to New York and Washington, and they say Americans are rolling up their sleeves quite literally nationwide to make sure that there is enough blood to treat the wounded. Thelma Gutierrez reports now from Los Angeles.
At the American Red Cross in the heart of Los Angeles, a long line formed outside the door. Dozens waited to come in and donate blood.
I lived in New York for about 12 years, and so I really wish that I were there to help more directly. So this is the little I can do.
Inside was a scene staff members say they had never witnessed before. Donors, hundreds of them, lined the corridors, sitting on the floor and any place else they could find space, waiting for their names to be called.
I have never seen this type of turnout. I've been here for 5 years. This turnout is just, it's amazing. It's amazing how when a tragedy like this happens, people are just moved to do something, anything they can to show that they care.
15 Red Cross technicians drew blood while volunteers kept the lines moving. They were overwhelmed by the response. One Red Cross center estimates 250 units of blood was collected on Tuesday, an unprecedented amount in one day. The problem remains in how to transport the supply. According to a spokeswoman, the blood must first be tested. The Red Cross is negotiating with the military to deliver the supply to the East Coast. The wait to give blood at one Southern California center was up to 5 hours, but the staff said no one complained. Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
Well, we're going to continue with our coverage of this day of disaster, the attack on America. And we're going to be joined by John Mann and Relitza Vasileva here to take over for us, Colleen.
That's right. They're moving in. We're moving out. I'm Colleen McEdwards.
And I'm Jim Clancy. As we go, we want to recap here some of the latest pictures that we have in. This is from Lower Manhattan, the scene of the devastation today in what is undoubtedly going to be the worst terror attack in the history of the United States. A terror attack that may change everything, that Americans themselves overwhelmingly see as nothing short of an act of war.
hits the United States financial capital out of the clear blue sky.
And then it strikes again, directly into the Pentagon. The attacks are unimaginable, the perpetrators unknown, and the casualties are unthinkable. But the U.S. president insists the American spirit has survived.
Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
Now panic in the streets turns into a frantic search for survivors as rescue crews pick apart piles and piles of rubble. Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann.
And I'm Relitza Vasilova. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of Tuesday's terrorist attacks in the United States. Massive search and rescue operations are underway in New York and Washington, the sites of devastating and experts say coordinated attacks that shook the United States on Tuesday. I want to show you the latest pictures now from Lower Manhattan. Parts of the once bustling financial district have been reduced to rubble. Officials haven't even hazarded a guess as to how many bodies may be buried there. Estimates run into the thousands. But there's also hope for survivors. There are reports that cell phone calls are coming from beneath the debris. Already several injured people have been pulled from the collapsed buildings.
Now let's take a look at the latest video of the attacks on the World Trade Center. You'll see a hijacked airliner slamming into the South Tower Tuesday morning. Now the same scene slowed down. It was the second jetliner crash. A different plane had struck the North Tower minutes earlier. The towers collapsed shortly afterward, and later so did a 47-story building in the World Trade Center complex.
U.S. President George W. Bush learned of the attack while he was visiting an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida. His plan to talk about education changed immediately. Mr. Bush was whisked away and flown around the country, stopping at military installations in Louisiana and Nebraska before finally returning to the White House at dusk. Once there, he addressed the nation and the world.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
At the U.S. Defense Department, the feared toll is shocking. Authorities say 100, perhaps 800 people are missing. A tally from area hospitals shows at least 73 people were wounded when the hijacked jet slammed into the Pentagon, causing part of it to collapse. 64 people were aboard the flight, and all are presumed dead. Part of the building is still burning at this hour. Firefighters are not expected to be able to extinguish all of the flames until daylight. Government sources tell CNN that the hijacked airliner that crashed in western Pennsylvania was headed for another government target, possibly the White House, the Capitol, or the Camp David presidential retreat. It's unclear how the flight was diverted from its target. The sources say members of Congress were told that authorities are confident the evidence so far points to Osama bin Laden.
We want to take a moment now to give you another look at some exclusive video from the scene of the attacks in New York City. Here you just saw the American Airlines Flight 11 as it slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. These pictures show the second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, crashing into the other tower 18 minutes later. Meticulously planned, very well coordinated attacks. Rescue crews are working through the night in New York City, combing through the rubble of the collapsed buildings. CNN's Garrick Utley joins us now live with more on that. Garrick.
Really, it's shortly after 3 o'clock in the morning here. We hope in a few hours with daylight, officials may start to be able to give us on this new day some more specific ideas to what casualties will rise to here in New York City. The Mayor Giuliani, said they're going to be in the thousands. They're going to be horrendous, more than we can possibly imagine. But as of right now, just witnessing some of these pictures we were seeing a moment ago, those planes crashing into the Twin Towers, of course the thing that's foremost in our minds, the trauma really, the shock, is the human cost, the casualties. But there's also something else that has been lost. The buildings themselves. What are these buildings? It may sound very materialistic, but look at some of them here and what they mean to our lives. They are more than just steel or stone. They represent what the nation is. They become and have become iconic landmarks that do mark the land, that do define us. That bridges and roads are the arteries. We are so vulnerable because we depend on them. The Empire State Building has been a symbol for decades in New York and around the world. And of course, the two towers that were there until early yesterday morning. And now we see what brought them down. The first jet 8:45 on Tuesday morning. And then what followed? The terror followed by the unbelievable. The collapse of the towers, more than 100 stories going down like the proverbial cliched deck of cards. But why did these buildings collapse? Buildings that went up only 30 years ago, that should last for a century or more. It wasn't the explosion, the force of the two planes, structural engineers tell us. It was the heat. The flames there burned too long and too hot, rising above 1,500 degrees. It began to melt the steel. And the floors in the towers were connected to the steel skin on the outside. And as that steel literally melted, that floor gave way, fell on the next, and down they came. That was the structural failure. They were not built to withstand more than 1,500 degrees of heat caused by two planes fully laden with gasoline flying into them on this day here in New York. And now we just look downtown at where they were, the former towers standing there, those landmarks known around the world, nothing but a plume of dust and the searchlights for rescue workers there this evening. But again, this is really the story of people, those trapped there and on the airplane and in the Pentagon. And Maria Hinojosa of CNN's New York Bureau looked at what happened today from the perspective of the street.
At ground zero, running in the streets is the only form of escape. But on those same streets, the chaos and vibrations couldn't be avoided. Further north, New Yorkers gathered at Times Square. In humble silence and disbelief, everyone looking up to the big screen. Downtown, the mass exodus began.
I saw everybody crying in the streets, saying their prayers and crying. I saw different races, nationalities, and creeds that usually have differences with one another come together and bond and love and respect.
Along Fifth Avenue, people flooded to the streets to watch together.
Oh my God, it's inside the first building.
The faces of New Yorkers, solemn, quiet, praying. A father trying to give security to the innocent ones. The tiniest of faces, protected. Streets filled with anger and shock.
I have never witnessed nothing like this in my entire life. Human beings, parents, daughters and sons jumping out of the window at least from 80-something floors. None of you want to witness that. I'm traumatized for life.
The street where now everyone shares the pain out in the open without shame. The street where office chairs have become eerie stretchers outside a hospital.
We've had multiple types of injuries, from severe burns to blunt injuries and multiple fractures.